Good morning. Welcome back to National Post Radio. We are in the thick of summer, and that might have a lot of people worrying or fretting or perhaps going a bit too far in trying to get their so-called summertime bodies. Joining us to discuss how to tell when your diet has become a bit unhealthy is Kyla Fox. She's a member of the Academy of Eating Disorders and the National Eating Disorder Association. Joining us this morning. Kyla, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So I know this is a time where people are maybe paying attention to what they eat. Other people may be getting a bit concerned at how many barbecues they're attending. I'm wondering, where does this cross the line from being, this normal summertime behavior into being something that can be more of a long-term issue?
Well, I think what's important to know about eating disorders is that despite the fact that obviously summer means more physical exposure, we're a little bit more, we're less dressed, so to speak. I guess we're more connected to our body in that way, and we're more connected to seeing other people out in the world. But eating disorders are not seasonal in that way. They're really severe mental health issues that are caused by emotional, psychological, and mental circumstances that cause someone to want to manifest their control or lack of their control through food in the body. So in the summertime, when we might have more attention paid towards our body, this might ignite ideas about what we may want to do to try to manipulate the way that we look. But our ability to be protected from developing eating disorders will really stem from really having really strong mental health and strong relationships and a good sense of self.
Absolutely. And I do think it's such a good point. There's always a slew of articles about getting your beach body or whatever that means. And I know the pressure, especially in the social media era, can be pretty high on a lot of people to try to, lose weight is the big one. I know one of the trends that is being seen is sort of this extreme dieting. I'm wondering if you could explain this to us, or extreme healthy eating, if you will.
You mean in terms of orthorexia, that kind of...
Yes. And for listeners who don't know what orthorexia is, I'm wondering if you could explain it.
Yeah, absolutely. So orthorexia is an eating disorder category that identifies as a person who is really consumed with needing to make food choices that are about healthy eating or clean eating, a sort of concept of like purity, essentially. And so what ends up happening is that a person becomes particularly obsessive or even anxious about their needs to control the kinds of foods that they put into their body. And so, as you know, and what you said too, that, culturally we're really inundated with messages around clean eating and, farm to table or grass-fed this or gluten-free that. And so a lot of the times what ends up happening when it comes to anything in its extreme is that people don't have the ability to regulate or have, a balanced relationship with food when they're engaged in these messages. And not everyone obviously develops really strong, pervasive, and intrusive behaviors with food in their body. Otherwise, everybody would be walking around with an eating disorder or really severe disordered eating. But the preoccupation culturally that we see is really, really pronounced.
Absolutely. So, given, as you just said, that this doesn't happen to everyone, that, not everyone who's watching their figure in the summer or who is trying to eat a bit more healthy is going to develop an extreme eating disorder. How do you encourage behaviors in a way so people can pursue a bit of a healthier lifestyle without crossing that line?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing to know is that because eating disorders really are not about food and they're not about the body, they're really about a person's sense of self and their emotional and mental well-being. I think that's probably the difference between someone entering into, really harmful behaviors with food in their body on the sort of spectrum of eating disorders. And if you have a really stable sense of self and the ability to regulate your food safely and recognize how to be balanced when it comes to healthy eating, but also moderation, not denying yourself things that, are really important and joyful about life when it comes to certain kinds of foods or certain kinds of experiences with food, then I think you're probably a lot safer in your ability to not fall under the guise of, having to manage certain rules and regulations.
Absolutely. So it's trying to keep that healthy mentality and that healthy sense of self that can help prevent something like this and still allow you to enjoy that occasional ice cream cone in the summertime. One last question before we let you go is
Sure.
how would you recognize this behavior in friends and family, and how would you recommend talking to them if people are seeing this and want to, lend someone a hand?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think some of the obvious things when it comes to maybe food or the body is recognizing the ways that people are becoming differently particular around the things that they eat, or the time that they eat, or the way that they eat, or what they won't eat, or maybe that they won't show up to food the same way, or find anxiety around food or particularities. Perhaps even also, changes in the body. And I think those are, at the surface of what people generally tend to see first or look for. But I think it's really important not to underestimate the ways in which you notice people changing in terms of their mood. Are they isolated? Are they feeling more depressed? Do they seem preoccupied or unable to participate in life the way that they used to? And I think those are really critical signs that are probably primary when eating disorder behavior is percolating. And it isn't until it shows up in food in the body that people really start to plug in. So I would notice the mental and emotional states of people that you're around. And I think that when you know somebody or love somebody who is suffering or who you're concerned about, my philosophy is always to really kindly and honestly address that with them. Like, hey, I noticed this about you. Are you okay? These things that you're doing with food or, with your body, I've never seen that in you before. Is there anything I can do to help you or to support you? I mean, often people will say that they'll be met with resistance, and that can be possible. I think some of the things that we can say to keep that open conversation is just that, I'm here and I'm going to check in on you, and I'd love to be able to talk to you about this, and you're safe with me, and I'll happily look for supports and resources for you. Just being open about the fact that it's real and not letting it drop if that person is resistant at the first interaction.
Absolutely. That's really great advice. And certainly, showing people that you're there for them as they go through this type of mental health disorder or any other is always great advice. Kyla, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.